Ms. Avila Frias. Ms. Gallagher. Here. Ms. Gunn for Secretary Imbasiani.
Here.
Mr. Gunning.
Here.
Mr. Hunter.
Here.
Ms. Johnson Hall. Treasurer Ma. Mr. Olmsted for Acting Director McCauley.
Here.
Secretary Podesta.
Here.
Mr. Prince. Mr. Russell.
Present.
Ms. Sotelo.
Here.
Ms. Hegg for Ms. Gordon.
Here.
And Ms. Keeley Bosler. Ms. Patterson. We have quorum. Thank you.
We have approval of minutes from December 6th, 3rd, and November 21st. Has everyone had a chance to look through those? Any questions, edits, corrections? Can we pass these in by acclamation?
Without opposition.
Without opposition? Deem the minutes approved. Let's move on to chairman and executive director comments. A new year. I think this year, as the governor said, is a year of production. And I know we're looking forward to that, and I think we're going to play an integral role in that. And I look forward to that. So let's have an exciting year. Tia, the floor is yours.
Well, welcome. I know it's February, but Happy New Year, because I don't think I've seen you since December. Couple of updates. Last week, I was in Washington, D.C., and I serve on the new Freddie Mac's Housing for Tomorrow Council, which is a mixture of housing leaders or thought leaders and folks that touch residential development. So it was a really interesting conversation. So I'm looking forward to participating in, with national leaders as we look to address our housing crisis. I also had an opportunity to meet with Brian Montgomery, who is the Assistant Secretary and FHA Commissioner at HUD, which was a really thoughtful and good conversation. We talked about our multifamily programs. We talked about down payment assistance and the need for us to have some best practices around our down payment assistance. And he was looking to California specifically because he felt that our model of down payment assistance was a good model to use, and so I want to make sure that we participate in any national conversations on the formulation of best practices around down payment assistance. I attended the Housing Justice LA Summit at the encouragement of our board member, Mr. Hunter, and that was absolutely incredible. So it's Molly Reisman, who is a staffer with County Supervisor Sheila Kuehl. And when we get an opportunity, I really would like her to come and talk to the board about her thesis and how she has incorporated affirmatively furthering fair housing into their continuum of housing programs, specifically dealing with homeless all the way through the continuum of housing needs. And the last board meeting, since the last board meeting, we are developing our 2021 business plan. So we are scheduled our off sites and we are bringing all that together, and we will be bringing that back to you during our March board meeting where we're presenting our business plan and our mid-year operating budget. Also a reminder on March 17th that we will have guest speaker Richard Rothstein, who was the author of The Color of Law. You know, we have been trying to get him for about a year, and it all fits within this paradigm of which I've asked leadership staff at CalHFA. I really want us to incorporate fair housing into everything that we do. And as we see the federal government or other folks taking a step back position on that, really long-term housing discrimination and state-sponsored or federal government-sponsored segregation and exclusionary policies have really been the driver of some of our homelessness and our housing crisis. And so to be able to start affirmatively looking at that through a lens is something I really want to promote at CalHFA. And I know our sister agency at HCD has also done a lot of this work. And this is really important for the governor too. He is encouraging leadership and thought around inclusivity, ethnicity, and gender inclusiveness. And so this is completely consistent where the governor and the first partner are. In March, we will have our annual NCSHA Legislative Conference in Washington, D.C. That is March 9th through 12th. And I want to give a shout out to Mr. Russell, whose organization, the San Diego Housing Federation, is celebrating their 30th anniversary this year. And he will be headed back to San Diego, but I'm pleased to have him here. We had a resolution for your organization, but we've sent it on already to San Diego. And lastly, I probably shouldn't have saved it for last, but Secretary Podesta, who has been with us since 2015, it is crazy, has been appointed to the State Compensation Insurance Fund, but she has been a remarkable leader. I have learned so much from you. I mean, just your presence and thoughtfulness and your calming demeanor and how you have just been able to just bring it all together. I don't know how you do what you do, but has been nothing short of amazing. And I want to thank you. I want to wish you well. And we have a little resolution.
Oh, gosh.
Yes, of course.
A little resolution for her. And this is from the CalHFA board and signed by the chair and myself, thanking her for her service and thanking her for being a thoughtful leader and a wonderful leader in the housing space. So thank you, Secretary, for that stuff. So Secretary Podesta will be leaving us at the end of this month, and the governor has appointed a new Secretary of Business Consumer Service Housing Agency. That is Lourdes Ramirez Castro, and Secretary Podesta speaks very highly of her. She is a leader in the housing space. We'll make sure that we get her bio out to all of you. The governor also did make some staffing changes within the governor's office, and Jason Elliott, who had a portfolio of this, will now have a portfolio of this where he will be focusing specifically on housing and homeless issues. So to have a point of contact within the governor's office, having those issues directly targeted and focused on those issues, which are so important to the governor, is a good thing. It allows me to take a step back, which is wonderful. Yes.
Does that mean he has your job now?
Well, it means that he is the senior counselor. And all calls related to senior counselor within the governor's office related to housing. Mark Tolleson is still in his role, and I still provide advisory services, but it does free me up to be able to focus and target my time back here at CalHFA and at a federal level with NCSHA, which I told you all in December I was interested in doing. So this is exactly how it's turned out. And so I still work very closely with Jason, and we'll all still be working very closely with him, but it does prevent that coordinated single spot within the governor's office. So with that, that concludes my remarks.
Excellent. Any questions from board members or comments from board members? Welcome.
Hello, thank you.
Hello.
And Genevieve, you want to introduce yourself? Can we have?
Yes.
Oh, sure, Genevieve Japona, Chief of Staff to the Treasurer of California, FUNAMA.
And we're so happy to have
Happy
you
to be
today.
here.
Happy to see you.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right, moving on to item number 4. Jennifer, why don't you come up and let's talk about Executive Evaluation Committee Charter.
Good morning, members of the board. I'm Jennifer LaBeouf, the Director of Administration. When the Executive Evaluation Committee, or the EEC, met in November of 2019, they discussed and recommended modifying their charter to require a minimum of 1 meeting per calendar year rather than 2. Since over the last several years, the EEC has struggled to find a reason for their second annual meeting. Of course, nothing precludes them from holding additional meetings as needed, but they would no longer be required to hold a second meeting unless it's necessary. Additionally, there are some administrative edits to the charter that do not have any material impact, but simply clean up the language as noted in the footnote of the first page. You should have a redlined version of the charter in your board packets, along with an updated version of the charter incorporating the redlined edits. Please let me know if you have any questions.
Any questions from board members? We saw this last meeting, so I think this is going forward. Great, let's roll call vote, or do we need a vote?
Move it. We have a motion and a
There's been a
second.
motion and a second. Ms. Flores?
Ms. Davila Farias? Ms. Gallagher? Ms. Gunn?
Yes.
Mr. Gunning?
Yes.
Mr. Hunter?
Yes.
Ms. Ms. Japanda?
Yes.
Mr. Olmsted?
Yes.
Secretary Podesta?
Yes.
Mr. Prince? Mr. Russell? Ms. Sotelo?
Yes.
Resolution 20-01 is approved.
Great, thank you, Jennifer. Moving on to item 5, Kate Ferguson. Hear about some projects.
It's not up here. So we don't have it. Okay. So I don't have a PowerPoint. Do you have that? No. Members of the board, I'm going to be presenting off a PowerPoint that you're not going to be able to see, but I think we can get to the crux of the message without that, and we'd be happy to forward it on to you after the fact. So good morning, Chair Gunning and members of the board. I am Kate Ferguson, Director of Multifamily Programs at CalHFA. I'm here today to bring you a quick update on the current status of the Mixed Income Program, or MIP, as we call it. This first slide, which you can't see, is a quick reminder of the AB 101 and SB 2 funding for our MIP program through fiscal year 22-23. Over the next 3 years, we'll make commitments to utilize MIP funds totaling $180 million in fiscal year 1920, $135 million in fiscal year 2021, $160 million in 21-22, and $125 million in 22-23. And this includes both AB 101 funds combined with the $40 million a year that we get from the SB2 funds. The really exciting news that I wanted to show you on my slide is that of the $180 million available in fiscal year 1920, $43.75 million has been fully committed. We've issued final commitments to 7 projects developing 1,300 units, and that was through our first round of MIP. An additional $92 million was preliminarily committed last month to 12 new deals, developing an additional 1,500 units. These deals all submitted bond cap requests to CIDLAC in January for March allocation, and we feel confident that they will get that. They are also paired with the $200 million in tax credits that goes with our MIP program as allocated through AB 101. The exciting result is that to date for fiscal year 1920, MIP commitments total $137 million and have been leveraged to fund 19 new affordable housing developments and over 2,800 units, new units of production. The summary of the 12 applications we just approved for initial commitments that went to CIDLAC, of those, a very exciting piece of that story is that CalHFA will also be the permanent lender for all but 2 of those projects, thereby leveraging $200 million of state tax credits and $92 million in MIP loans with another $160 million in CalHFA perm debt. Based on the fact that our total fiscal year 1920 MIP availability is $180 million, and given that we've committed to $135 million or 74% of that availability to date, we're confident that the total $180 million will be committed prior to the end of this fiscal year. The $200 million in state tax credits received by CalHFA for deployment in 2020 are anticipated to also be fully committed by the end of the fiscal year as well. I wanted to close today with some information about the actual funding of these dollars, and I have a great slide which I will send to you. with some of the information about the project funding cycle and timeline. The primary sources of funding during each phase from pre-development through site control acquisition, construction loan close, and construction completion are also listed there, so I'll let you see. I think most of you are familiar with how the sources of funding come in, but just to be clear, as you know, our MIP and permanent loan dollars are funded during the last phase of the construction cycle at the time that the permanent loan and the tax equity funds come in. This is usually 3 to 4 years from the close of the construction loan, and it might be up to 7 years from the initial pre-development that a developer might start. So I just wanted to, so while I've reported to you today on the commitments we've made to the 19 projects, which will begin construction in calendar year 2020, our commitments won't actually be funded. We estimate, and they won't be funded until permanent loan conversion, which is estimated to be 2023 and 2024. So I just want to be clear as we report out on the commitments, which is a very exciting thing and represents new product development for affordable housing in the state. The actual deployment of the funds doesn't come in until the permanent loan funding, which is 3 to 4 years out. I offer this just for information purposes to make sure that my excitement about the new units doesn't confuse the matter of the commitment versus the funding. And I'm happy to take any questions related to that if anyone has any. Additionally, for your information in your package, you'll see the 3 final commitments that MIPS that have been approved by the Senior Loan Committee within CalHFA. The staff reports are included. None of these include CalHFA perm debt, and therefore they do not require board approval. We've included them for your review. And I have Ruth Healy here, who's the loan officer, and Sheena Coe, our credit officer, if you have any questions on those. And with that, we'll open it up to questions. And I do apologize again that for some reason the PowerPoint didn't get done.
I have something I'd like to add.
Please, because I
During the CIDLAC meeting, the California Debt Limit Allocation meeting, where they where they set the state ceiling and award the sub-allocations and sub-allocations, CIDLAC staff had originally proposed about 18% of the QRRP, which is the Qualified Residential Rental Project pool, which is the multifamily pool, for our mixed income program. That was about 730 million or so. We had asked for $1 billion. So staff had proposed a little over 700 million to meet our needs for the mixed income program. CIDLAC board, however, voted to reduce that to 15%, which represented close to 1/5 or about 20% of the bond allocation we expected to go with our funds. And so I wanted to make sure that the board was aware of that, even though we'll have 44 million in mixed income program funds left after all of these rounds have been committed, that making sure that we have enough bond volume to go with those mixed income programs is something that we're going to be staying on top of and reporting back to the board. So when we agreed to move some of those allocations around, because we wanted to make sure that we were focusing on production and new construction, the CIDLAC board, I reminded the board that the mixed income program was a new construction program and that we reserved the right to come back and seek more volume cap. And so I wanted to just make sure I went on the record and made that clear, that to expend our mixed income program is contingent on having enough volume cap to be able to make those deals work.
Thank you, absolutely.
good point.
And it's something we're tracking very, very closely. Any questions on the staff reports?
Mr. Russell. A question and a general comment. So the question is, so if these funds have been collected, these are SB2 funds, yes?
SB2 and AB 101 both.
Okay.
Yes.
So are any of these funds being held in anticipation of these closings down the road?
Yes.
And are they being put to work?
I'm going to
Actually, we are putting them to work because it doesn't make sense to just hold on to funds. And so we have adopted some financial strategies that will be able to extract value. We are a lender, and a lender with a purpose, and so we will not just be sitting on those, we'll be treating them as investment so that they will be working for us. And then we, during the budget proposal and the mid-year report, we'll have Tim Sue come and explain some of those financial strategies to you all, because that's some of the things we've been doing internally. And because we do have the ability to use financial strategies to be able to use these funds as investment, we'll be able to make those funds work for us while still meeting our commitments.
So then, the more general comment is just looking at these three pro formas, and this is not about the projects, it's about the environment we're working in, is, looking at the local impact fees on these projects, how widely they range in amount from a low of 29,000 per unit up to 113,000 per unit.
And which jurisdiction is that has the 113,000 per unit?
San Mateo County,
Yes.
yeah.
You want to say that again, Mr.?
So if you look at San Mateo County with almost 114,000 per unit, that's high. But recognizing that local municipalities are using this to fulfill functions that we used to use state revenues from pre-Prop 13. What it raises in my mind, and this is a very general comment, is that we have been raising a lot of funds for housing, but the funds for infrastructure that local municipalities need, and not just general infrastructure, targeted to those places where housing is being built to incentivize municipalities to accept and build that housing. I think that's something we need to be talking about.
We did good work getting some housing funds together, but if we don't have the infrastructure dollars, communities are going to continue to resist, and we're going to be putting the burden, and not just on
affordable housing, but on all housing. We should be looking at how we achieve these infrastructure ends.
If I could respond to that just briefly. In the January 2020-2021 budget, for the first time in my knowledge of housing and infrastructure, the actual infrastructure section of the budget mentions housing as infrastructure. And so that is something that this administration is thinking of. And if you recall, last year during the 1920, when he provided those $250 million in planning and capacity building for local jurisdictions, both regional and cities and counties, that there was $500 million in infill infrastructure grants that went along with that. So this administration has recognized that infrastructure needs are important. Our sister department over at Department of Housing and Community Development did put out a report that they had commissioned from the Turner Center on impact fees. So understanding that this is all related and needs to be a part of those policy conversations, I believe we are having those policy conversations.
Just to double down on that a bit, I mean, there was a program that was very successful in some of our communities in San Diego that was, we got Parks dollars for every affordable housing unit that we built. That kind of rewarding a local municipality is one way to get at it, and the other is simply to do the streets, gutter, sidewalk, and God bless, the stormwater is a huge cost that is a burden on individual developers, whether affordable or not, and we need a strategy on that because we're doing it in the most inefficient way possible on a project-by-project basis, and it's costly, and it's diminishing the capacity to build housing. So I just
Perhaps you should testify during the budget
let me know when. I like to travel up here and see y'all.
Exactly.
I know some folks at CBIA that'd love to hear this comment.
We share. This is one of those areas we share the love.
Delilah, you have a comment?
Just to build on what Russell had said in his initial comment, is there a way, and maybe we'll look forward to Tim's conversation around this, of utilizing the commitments as a forward commitment, but also maybe developing a program where we could do acquisition, pre-development financing, or provide a top loss guarantee for CDFI who wants to do acquisition, pre-development financing to help, with the mixed income product kind of at the back end. It still stays within the spirit of the program itself, but it utilizes the money in a much needed area that developers have for that kind of piece financing.
Well, it's funny you should say that. So yes, we will be bringing a
good.
proposal that looks very similar to
Oh,
that.
okay, oh, great. Yay, see, great minds. Sorry about that. And then just to understand your comment, Tia, around the volume cap, the MIP program can only be used with bond funding, or can it be used without obtaining bonds?
Well, our mixed income program, the way it is set up now, it was pair with 4% federal credits, which you can only obtain with an allocation of bonds.
Tax
That's
exempt
the way
bonds.
we did set up the mixed income program.
Okay, so,
But the ability to have some flexibility, whether we want to use that as all maybe first lien lending as opposed to just subordinate debt lending and modify some of that, we do have the ability to come back and have that conversation.
okay,
And I
just
think
because,
we need to see how we get through this year's bond cap and hopefully we'll have enough to make sure we can deploy everything for this year, but it's going to be an issue.
right, because that would be a significant issue if we can't, if we're hitting up against a far reduced volume cap. And programmatically, that makes it so that, our dollars can't roll out as quickly and be as efficient as possible.
Well, the
And there
good
are
news is-
developers out there that may not need tax exempt bonds or 4% credits
Right.
to make the program
And the
work.
good news is the dollars are flexible and we have been in significant discussion around just that issue.
Okay,
Because this, hitting the volume cap is not just an issue for our mixed income program. There was a lot of subordinate debt and state resources that are going out for 2020.
Yeah.
And there's just not enough volume cap to meet all of the need that we've put out. I think during the demand survey, they came back and said the demand survey for volume cap for multifamily projects was 9 billion. Well, you only have 3.2 billion for multifamily. So you could see already. So if you have MHP, which is HCD's multifamily housing program, No Place Like Home, affordable housing, sustainable community dollars, all of those dollars were meant to go with the bond volume cap. So we have more resources in subordinate debt and gap financing than we do to pair with the volume. And so we're all taking a look at that and trying to juggle that. And the good news is, like Kate has said, the ability to be flexible with that money, as long as we're meeting the needs to create or preserve lower moderate income housing, we have that ability.
great, okay, wonderful. Keep us apprised of that.
Will do.
So I had it's sort of a question. So these three projects were included because they're the only ones that have finished the completed approval?
Yes, the 12 projects that we submitted to CIDLAC received an initial commitment. Once they get their CIDLAC allocation, they come back and they go through, we do the final underwriting, the final commitment is issued after we go to Senior Loan Committee for the final. And so we're just bringing these to you for your information.
Okay, so then one other question and then some comments. In the very first one, it talked about varying from the term sheet of limiting 40,000 per unit for the mixed income. Is that a program cap across all the, I mean, is that the target we're trying to hit? Because I noticed almost all of them are over 40,000.
So these were all approved in November by the board for variances to the program, because we did have to, all of these deals came in thinking they would access the state tax credits. And so the board did approve in November via resolution, which number I can't remember, but that we would go over on these to help fill that gap that was created because we were trying to preserve the 200 million in tax credit, in state tax credits to go with our 2020 rollout of our new program.
So do we think going forward more of them will be closer to 40,000?
So, yeah, go ahead.
So the original NOFA limited to 40,000. When we revised the program and came to you all in September and November and told you we were revising the program,
Yeah, I remember
the
that.
program has been revised so that it's 50,000 up to 60% AMI up to 80, and 80% to 120, it's 100,000. So we've revised the program so that it's no longer 40,000 a door. That 40,000 a door applied to the first round. And so the program has been revised. We brought to you those program revisions. And so what Kate is bringing forward is a report out to show you the first phase, which is final commitment, which is the 7 projects, and then phase 2, which are the 2020 projects, which are 12 projects that have an initial commitment.
Right.
And so
Okay.
you'll see more of these as they go along the way, but this is just in a report out so that you know the status of where we are.
Yeah, so then just my kind of general comment was, yeah, I was trying to trying to figure out if there was some rationale for why we were seeing those three proposals. And one of the things that struck me about those three proposals is they were not only all over the map in terms of the local impact fees, they were all over the map in terms of total development costs and unit mix. And what struck me, and when you go from a development cost of $200,000 a unit up to almost $900,000 a unit, it's no wonder it's hard for the public to understand some of the modeling that we're trying to do to figure out, you know, how much money is really needed to develop X number of units. So it was really striking to me how you had three projects that are just, the diversity between the three, it's hard to find any commonalities. And I just my observation is that makes it extremely, I'm sure that makes it extremely challenging for staff to analyze and rate projects, but also for the board to figure out what really is the pattern going forward.
I think that's an excellent observation, which is why we're bringing this report out to you all so that you all can see. A lot of times when these projects do go up to CIDLAC or TCAC, this detail isn't presented to the board. And so having you all be able to be engaged and to recognize trends and to see what's happening so that you guys can then be able to talk about that and so that we can have hard conversations like that, that's exactly why we're bringing this to you as a report out so that you can see what's going on up and down the state of California. Because these projects geographically range from Burlingame, which is right outside of South San Francisco in the San Mateo County, to Gilroy, to Sacramento, right? Where those three projects. And so you can see the various impact fees that are being charged. You can see the varying development costs. San Mateo required podium, underground, subterranean parking to be replaced. That is extremely expensive. And so a lot of times the local requirements and the public benefit that is put on to these projects makes these projects very, very expensive. And we will not be able to get down to some of those cost drivers until we have more open discussions and hard discussions and be able to have board members be able to take a look at that data.
Thank you, Jonathan. Great comments. Any other board members? Go ahead, Mr. Russell.
But you raised the issue, Ms. Boatman, about the parking replacement, and that really struck me as just like a really enormous exaction being made, and that we're using affordable housing dollars to finance municipal parking. So how do we not end up there again? I imagine it's a long and tortuous route, but we've got to start, because this is crazy. I mean, this is absolutely insane that and with the development impact fees as well, we're essentially subsidizing $100,000 of local infrastructure through our lending.
So board members should show up at their local government when affordable housing is being presented and bring this to the attention of local government. So, city council member, you're extracting this from affordable housing. Do you really want this affordable housing? I think the way to get at this issue is disclosure and education and talking about it.
TFMA, too, some of our increased enforcement authorities at AC are starting to try to drill down this on a project level where we can. And the recent passage of SB 330 helps us with that a little bit as well. So, for example, we just sent a letter to the city of Simi Valley specific to a project that said, hey, you can't also apply conditions to this project that would render it infeasible per SB 330. And we are tying that to their need to produce that housing in order to be compliant with their housing element and that sort of thing in our new enforcement capabilities that have arisen over the last couple of years. So it's my hope that we are able to do that a lot, or as often as it makes sense on a project level. We don't have visibility, of course, into each and every project. Many of these choices or exactions, if you will, happen well before it gets to a planning decision body, right? The environment of the city is such that a developer knows that this will happen, so they never even propose a project. And that is one of the hardest things we can't engage on. But where it may be a decision that's coming before a public body, we are starting to take a more active engagement. They're not always public action. Sometimes it's a phone call or a private conversation with the city to try to get to the outcome we want. But the one with Simi Valley was actually public. And so please, if you are aware of those sorts of things, and we can engage, at least at the State Department level, using our enforcement authority that has really been expanded over the last couple of years, please let us know and put the word out to your developer friends to let us know. The hard part about putting that out there is we put that out there, a majority of those complaints maybe not be germane, and there's a staff workload associated with making sure that those aren't germane. So we really want to make sure we're focusing on the ones that are helpful. And in most cases, it's when developers reach out to us directly, those are ones we're able to at least try to influence or act on. And it's not always cut and dry, but the example you give, I think, could be an example where we could point to that may render a project infeasible from a financing standpoint, and maybe would give us a hook to exert some of our enforcement authority.
Well, I'm a firm believer in carrot and stick. And when you look at these projects, I mean, clearly the additional public benefits that we see from affordable housing has been part of the acceptance of affordable housing in some of these communities. But it goes right back to that need that we should be having infrastructure dollars build infrastructure and housing dollars build housing. And so we're here for the long haul.
Okay, Kate, anything else?
Chair Gunning,
Yes, please.
one additional point on that front, on housing, I'd just like to mention that some of our affordable housing sustainable communities dollars actually prohibit the use of those dollars for parking purposes in particular, because they run counter to several of the state's goals around climate mitigation, as well as just around affordability. And I think looking at the location efficiency of these projects, as well as the type of infrastructure that we're funding with affordable housing dollars, is kind of crossing balance sheets, right? Sometimes the less expensive development cost for the development means that it puts more household cost burden on the final residents of those projects with the transportation cost added. So I presume that a project that is including so much parking is including that parking because driving and having a car and parking it somewhere is essential to the livability of that project. Hopefully, that's why they're doing it and not some other purpose. But it kind of begs the question around, how are we looking at the location efficiency of the projects as a competitive factor for funding, and are we thinking about the total cost burden, housing plus transportation cost? I know HCD's statewide housing assessment that was adopted a few years ago has a really profound analysis of this that shows that I think it's upwards of 60% of average household cost goes to the combined cost of housing plus transportation for affordable housing. So just another layer to that equation to think about the infrastructure, and in particular the parking costs. I also just wanted to say on the subject of infrastructure finance that I think our office interfaces a lot with local planning departments and local planning agencies, and I think it's a complicated conversation about impact fees, because in some cases these are really necessary services and infrastructure that deem the affordable housing livable and functional in communities. And then there are cases too where they're being used for nefarious purposes and are de facto NIMBYism. And we just have to really do a lot of peeling back the layers of the onion to distinguish one from another and not accidentally have unintended consequences with policies that come down too hard hitting on jurisdictions that are very financially strapped as it is. Thanks.
Specifically with affordable housing, you're often exempt from property taxes, and that property taxes are a way in which that local jurisdiction pays for their municipal services. And so a lot of times these high development impact fees are in lieu of municipal services that need to be paid for because of the offset of the funds that the jurisdiction loses. And so Susan is right that there's an opposite side of the equation. There's the Prop 13 issues, there's the issues related to property taxes, and the funds local jurisdictions need to pay for municipal services. And so that is an important thing to keep in mind when we're having this conversation.
But let's not be confused that there are a lot that are not related to the project and are related to financing other things in local government's obligations.
Yes.
Okay.
One more word. This is of special concern to me, because this seemed to be in this case that it was a municipal parking lot that was being replaced. Is that correct?
San
Spaces
Mateo?
that were, and that's a case that we see in San Diego with recent approaches to using transit lands, transit authority lands. And of course, surplus lands are a big thing these days. There's a whole new push to make sure we're using these lands. And the authority had kept, MTS had kept these lands out of reuse by essentially having very high parking replacement requirements that made no sense when you're putting affordable housing potentially next to these stations. So there's a whole dynamic here. We could talk about this all day for a year, I think. And but I want to underscore the fact that this is why we need dedicated infrastructure dollars so that municipalities are not tempted or trying to exact these things from our developers.
Agreed. Okay, thank you. And thank you for the robust discussion. Thank you, Mr. Russell. Okay, let's move on to item number 6, report and discussion of CalHFA's administration of federal rental assistance programs. Ms. Massey.
Good morning, Chair Bennett
Morning.
and members of the board. I am Andre Massey. I am the Deputy Director of Multifamily Programs for CalHFA. Today I'm going to bring to you updates on the CalHFA administration of our federal rental assistance programs. And so with that, I'll move forward. CalHFA administers subsidy vouchers for 2 separate programs at this time. One is the Section 8 Rental Assistance Program, known as Section 8. The other is the Section 811 Project Rental Assistance Program, which we call 811 PRA. Over the course of this presentation, I will discuss CalHFA's historical and current role as a traditional contract administrator under Section 8 and as the grantee under the 811 PRA program. CalHFA has administered these programs for over 30 years. Oh, I'm sorry. Bear with me. For over 30 years, CalHFA has acted as a traditional contract administrator, a TCA, managing a pool of Section 8 housing assistance programs, the HAP contracts. Over the last 10 years, CalHFA has administered as many as 129 programs. And while I wasn't able to get all of the information, it does show that historically it's been as high as 154 projects dating back to 2002. Currently, CalHFA administers 64 HAP contracts, although this has diminished over the past 10 years. Since 2010, HUD has withdrawn 65 projects managed by CalHFA as the TCA. The projects are withdrawn for various reasons. Oops, sorry. The loan is fully repaid, expiration of the annual contribution contract, HAP contract is renewed under the Up to Market program, and once withdrawn, the HAP contracts are either assigned to HUD as the contract administrator or assigned to HUD's performance-based contract administrator, known as a PBCA. In November of 2019, HUD terminated CalHFA's role as the TCA on 14 HAP contracts. Sorry. On 14 HAP contracts. We've also had more recent communication with HUD that an additional 20 to 25 contracts, TCAs, would be terminated effective June 1. In the chart here that I'm showing you, you will see the decline in our administration of those TCAs over a 10-year period. I've also included the projection for fiscal year in 2021. Which reflects the additional 25 contracts that they are looking to move over effective June 1, essentially leaving 39 contracts under our administration. But HUD has verbally communicated their intent to move all HAP contracts to the PPCA platform and or HUD as the contract administrator, although they've given us no specific timeline as to when that's going to happen. Based on the continued withdrawal of the TCAs, CalHFA, we do find that the program is no longer economically feasible for us. Keep moving. From an economic downside, fiscal year in 2020 projections, we originally projected revenue, I should say, of 2.1 million, which includes an estimated 700,000 in back administration fees. So that number is a little elevated compared to past. Expenditures are estimated about 3 million, which include CalHFA's direct and indirect staff costs. Right now, we have 7 full-time staffers and 5 part-time staffers that are assisting with the administering of the Section 8 program. With the termination of the 14 TCAs and possibly the loss of the additional 20 to 25 by June 2020, revenue is expected to continue to fall below the annual average administration fee of 1.6 million. Over the last 10 years, we did some research and we realized that the average admin fee that CalHFA receives is 1.6 million. 2 of those years were slightly elevated due to back administration fees that we received outside of the fiscal year that they were due in. As of January 2020, CalHFA is currently due an estimated $225,000 in past due admin fees, which date back to July of 2018. And if there's no questions, I'll move on to the 811 program.
I do want to clarify that HUD did, for the first time, actually put in writing that they were terminating the traditional contracts administrations, that they had every intent to take them back. We had been asking for about 4 years about keeping all of the TCAs. So when I met with Mr. Montgomery, I had said that we've been asking this question for 4 years about your intent to take them back and switch them to another platform. And the position of the asset manager who would have responded had been vacant for 4 years. And so when CalHFA actually did get its response, the gentleman who was in that position had been in that position for 4 months, and he's the actual one that wrote the letter and responded. And so they have in writing communicated to us their intent to take these back.
Is there a reason it's happening in other states? Is it just the
Yes.
scale of our program?
Yes, it is. In the early 90s, late 90s, they, about a decade or so ago, yeah, it was actually longer than that. They said they were taking away the platform of traditional contract administration and moving that to performance-based contract administration for cost efficiency purposes. So this is something that has been going on for probably 15 years or so. And they've been trying to move all of the TCAs to the PBCA platform. And so it's just taken them a while. Some of it was lawsuits and the way they procured the PBCA contractor. And so they've been caught up in a back and forth of how to go about implementing this transfer. And so in order for them to go out with a new PBCA contract, they're trying to move all of the TCAs to the PBCA platform. So this is something that's been ongoing, that they've had a fit starts and fit stops over a number of years.
So what happens to the folks who get a Section 8 voucher?
They will continue to get their Section 8 voucher. It will just be another contract administrator. In California, we have 2 performance-based contractors. It's the Los Angeles City Housing Authority through their nonprofit instrumentality, which is LOMOD. And in Oakland, their housing authority, their contractor or nonprofit instrumentality of their housing authority is CAHI. Yes. California, I don't know what it stands for, but we have 2 PBCA contractors in the state of California. And so HUD will either send it to one of them to administer the contracts, or they'll take it back and administer it themselves. Got it.
Yes.
And what's going to happen with the 12 staffers that you had on that? Are they going to be reallocated?
Yes,
to
they
other...
are. There. We've already, started discussions, and based on our need on the lending side with the new MIP program and the number of projects that we, are projecting to come through, some of those staffers would be deployed to the lending side as maybe underwriters or loan administrators to assist with those programs. Asset management has a need for additional bodies as well, so some of those folks will also move over to the asset management side. The inspectors, this will actually give them a little, I shouldn't say breathing room, but just that. They're a little overwhelmed right now. We have 2 inspectors that are inspecting our entire portfolio, including our Section 8 projects. And so this just kind of gives them a level portfolio, because if the Section 8s go back to HUD, that then frees them up. So we've kind of considered a couple things there.
I think Ms. Sotelo and I will be happy that there'll be no more audit exceptions under this program, right? That's the first thing we were thinking.
That's what we.
As will we. Good.
Yeah.
Anything left? Do you want to?
As far as Section 8, I think that's it. If you
Did you see if there's any public comment on this?
Any comment from the public?
Okay.
Board members, anything else?
She has a second part of the rental assistance.
Yeah, I'd like to kind of go into the 811 program. And I'm sure everyone knows what that is, but I'll just kind of give a brief description. The 811 program differs slightly from Section 8. It provides project-based rental assistance funding to eligible state housing agencies. The funds are used for housing units combined with multifamily properties that are set aside extremely for low-income persons with disability ages 18 to 21 and who are eligible for community-based long-term care services. As the grantee under the Section 8 program, CalHFA is responsible for processing, executing rental contracts, and adjusting rents annually based on the operating cost adjustment factor. CalHFA administers approximately 14 active projects right now. That's 178 units. 115 are subsidized units right now, currently receiving vouchers. There are 39 vacant units where they are trying to find an eligible applicant for those units. And then there are 34 unavailable units, basically where the project has been awarded the 8011 voucher, but doesn't have an available unit. They have a waiting list right now. And so hopefully this number will diminish over time, as I stated here, as those units become available and they're able to put eligible 8011 recipients in those units.
Let me just interrupt you a little bit. The 811 program was initially a demonstration or a pilot program in which the state of California, via a partnership with other state entities, was the applicant. CalHFA was the applicant for those initial round 1. The partnership entails California Housing Finance Agency, the Department of Housing Community Development, the Department of Developmental Services, the Department of Health Care Services, and the Tax Credit Allocation Committee. So we are the partnering entities for the state that applied for the funds, their rental subsidy funds, and they are to bring long-term care folks out of the system and put them in permanent supportive housing with rental assistance as a cost-saving measure. So it was originally a pilot program for round 1. California was very successful in that round in bringing down some of those costs. Then they applied for round 2. And so this is where we are now.
Right.
We're in round 2 of that administration. CalHFA, because it was the one administering the vouchers, has been the recipient of the admin fees to administer those vouchers. Even though the partnership all is working together during the application, the back end work to actually administer the vouchers has fallen all on CalHFA. And so
with that, as you can see,
yes.
So just in recognizing that we have such a high need, I'm blown away that we have 39 vacant units.
It is, collaboration is very difficult.
You think?
Madam Secretary. And the screening of the persons for the program and then placing them into the housing unit, there is a disconnect. And I think instead of targeting our own portfolio that was already built, there was a decision that they would go and try to partner these rental subsidies with units that were going to be built. So recently, they've been provided direction from myself that they should look at existing portfolios and work with existing developers on existing units, because a lot of time what was happening is that they would go to place that rental subsidy on a unit, and then the construction of that unit would get moved out. So some of that is a placement issue as opposed to placing it on an already existing unit, looking forward to try to place it on a new unit that hadn't been constructed yet. And so I think with some of the changes and implementing and how we go about it, we may see some movement, and that's the hope, that we will start looking at the existing portfolios to put these rental subsidies on existing developments.
And as with some of the vacant units, the 34 unavailable units, while some of those may be waitlisted, some of those are also projects that are awaiting completion of construction, so.
Mr. Russell, you have a question?
Yes, thank you. So the costs are obviously very high, and I'm relative to what we're being reimbursed. Is that really just an issue of scale? Because I mean, this is a really, I mean, in the scheme of things, this is a pretty small program.
And it's very staffed.
So, a couple of questions that come from that. Are we expecting that this is going to grow, where we can grow into recouping those costs?
We are in the process of responding to the NOFA for the third round, which will add an additional 64 units. Not sure how many projects at this point, but 64 units. So I think the maximum we will see this project grow is probably to somewhere around 400 units. So it'll never be that large.
So given that, I've got several things to blob out there. One is it ever going to recoup that cost? Is it ever going to get to a scale? Are there alternate ways we can do this? I mean, I know that when we've had difficulties matching residents to opportunities in San Diego, there have been housing fairs, but it's on the ground folks who are already working in that sector, as opposed to staff that are dedicated from a finance agency. Is there a services or is there another place that this work could be doing that we could be paying them to outsource?
Well, let her get to her next slide.
Please. I still have more questions or comments, but let's roll through.
Okay. So I'll move on to my next slide, just kind of wrap up things here. In conclusion, based on the expenditures associated with administering the Section 8 program and HUD's decision to have either a PBCA or HUD administer the programs going forward, CalHFA doesn't believe that it is cost-effective to continue administration of the remaining possible 39 TCAs come June 1. As a result, CalHFA, we did respond, as Tia mentioned, we've had some correspondence with HUD. We did respond to HUD and provided them actually a schedule to kind of help them facilitate the transfer of these HAP contracts back to HUD. We've given them a schedule that goes from now through the end of 2020, December 31st, I should say. We also, our recommendation anticipates that we will, recoup $252,000 in past administrative fees that are currently due to the agency. Let's see, this decision will allow the redeployment of staff to support core business activities and eliminate the need to maintain an expensive software system used primarily to support the vouchering and compliance management of the TCA program. The 8011 program, while not profitable nor dependable as a backfill to Section 8, CalHFA is required to retain administration of that PRA, of the 8011 PRA program for the unforeseeable future. The 8011 program requires oversight from a state agency, experience with processing vouchers, and right now we don't have any other agency. Yeah. However, our obligations are the result of our response to the original NOFA for administration of the 8011 program, and we will continue to do that. Despite the fact that management is evaluating whether it makes sense for CalHFA to continue to apply and administer the future funds, we will be submitting our application for round 3. However, we want to ensure that the application, that we put in the application and make it very clear that we want to reserve our right not to accept the award if it's successful. The acceptance of the award should be based on our ability to also subcontract out the administration of those rental assistance vouchers. And so with that, I'll open it up to questions.
the deal is that it's not a cost effective, nor is it probably the best use of staff time or resources to continue to administer that at the state level. And so we have been looking internally exactly of what you're talking about, Mr. Russell, is there a way to facilitate strategic partnerships with either local housing authorities or other entities that have experience in vouchering that can do this at a more efficient cost structure? And so going into the third round, we want to make that very clear that we would like to amend round 1 and 2 to give us the ability to contract out some of those vouchering services, and that we not necessarily want to take on round 3 unless we do have the ability to make this more cost efficient run program. Because right now, all of this is pretty much falling on CalHFA, and as you know, CalHFA is not a general fund department. So when we expend these funds, they're just out of our own funds. Now, there are some savings that do go along with this program, and I think the Department of Healthcare Services said that there's probably nearly $3 million in general fund savings on the state Medicaid side that they receive, but CalHFA doesn't see any of the realization of those savings. And so although the state of California is benefiting, CalHFA operationally and financially is operating at a deficit. So I know in round 3, round 1 and 2, CalHFA received all of the admin fees. For round 3, our Department of Housing and Community Development have asked that we have a proportionate split on some of those admin fees, which means it would be even a larger fiscal impact onto CalHFA. And so we really are hesitant to take on the award of that third round without some assurances from HUD that we will be able to have the flexibility to contract some of those out at more cost-efficient cost structures.
Hang on a sec, Mr. Hunter, go ahead, then you next.
Yeah, part of what you just commented on is a classic illustration of the wrong pocket problem that keeps coming up in supportive housing, and that is that the people who build the housing don't achieve the savings, and the people who achieve the savings aren't responsible for developing the housing that helps them meet the needs of their clients. But I have a general question. Is the Section 811 PRA is a subset of 811, or is this the only 811 grant program currently operating?
I believe it's the
Only, yeah.
811. There are other Section 8 rental subsidies, but the 811 was, I believe, we need to confirm that, but it was specifically for this population to provide rental subsidies.
Yeah, it just...
And California has been the most successful, because it hasn't worked nationwide.
Right, but there wasn't, back in the old days, there was still an 811 project, Section 811
Capital
funds,
development?
but it was funding per development, and developers applied for the funds directly, and it didn't require this. And part of what happened was HUD wanting to make sure that states were combining the health and human services with the housing as part of why it ended up shifting to state level applications rather than project-based applications. And at some point we may want to do some advocacy in Washington about looking at whether that has been a good move for dealing with this population.
And let me correct, this third round, so the first and second round didn't allow developers, I think, to apply directly, but on this third round, there is developers can apply for capital development directly. So this third round was open to developers applying directly, although I don't believe, I asked HCD if they had done any outreach on whether they had heard from developers that wanted to apply for it, but the staff that I spoke to had no knowledge. Zach, do you have any knowledge of that?
This program is out of my program portfolio, so I'd have to get back to you.
Is ANOFA for capital or for operating subsidy?
It's for both. So it's either a state partnership or state entity can come and apply for the rental subsidy piece, or a developer, nonprofit developer who wants to apply for capital development can seek funding for the development piece. And so that was one of the things that I had asked the team early on. Well, are we aware of any developers that would go after this money, so that way
Is it one pot of money or two pots?
It's like one pot of money. And I think the most that state of California could receive is Or the whole thing is 7 million?
7 million for this third round.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's in non-jurisdiction localities. Like if you don't, like City of LA can't apply.
No, if you want to apply for the rental assistance, it has to be the state.
It has to be the state, but you allocate it based on non-proprietary jurisdictions.
Not necessarily.
No, your projects can be.
Yeah, they could be statewide. Yeah.
So, but, you know, and again, I'm too old for this stuff anymore, but originally, part of the way 811 was structured and what made it a powerful tool for meeting the needs of people with disabilities is that you applied for capital, but there was rent assistance,
right. You're
operating
right.
subsidies attached to it on an ongoing basis. And the only downside was HUD didn't adjust those operating subsidies annually according to inflation. So some of the developers got way behind on their maintenance. But you know, had always been, even though you were applying for capital, once you got the capital, the operating subsidy came with that.
Yes.
But it was administered by HUD.
You're absolutely
Yeah.
right. And that's
So
been
they
some of the
absorb the
problems with
cost.
the 1, 2, and 3, and there was advocacy to go back to that model, but I don't think they got the NOFA quite right, because they didn't go back to allowing it to be project-specific with capital development and rental subsidies that went along with it. It kind of split it up in this funky way where the state would apply for this, and then the individual developers could apply for that, which was kind of strange.
I have a question. So how do other states administer this program? Because I would guess we're probably one of the more sophisticated, and if we're in the red.
They stopped doing it.
Got it.
They're like, keep your money. It has been a very difficult, staff-intensive, pilot project. Where it has been successful, we have been able to show those savings, but there's this disconnect, I think, between who's doing the work and then who's receiving the savings. And other states have found it very difficult. And so there was a large push and a large advocacy for bringing back the capital development along with the rental subsidies on a project basis. I think because we had a new administration that came on and it didn't quite line up like it should have.
Yeah, although in my opinion, the ultimate fix is to require the state to reinvest its savings in covering the deficit of the operating cost, because this is part of the cost of doing it. So the trick is figuring out, and it's always been a challenge at the local level because you were working across governmental lines. But if it's a state, one would think it would be a little easier to fix that silo problem and to get the health department that's generating the savings to subsidize the operating costs from CalHFA that's helping those savings occur.
What else?
And that's it.
You want to wrap up?
That's it.
All right, thanks for the discussion.
All righty, thank you.
Moving briskly along to item number 7, I think we're going to go into closed session. Is that correct? Ask everyone to exit the room for a brief moment. Session. And Jennifer.
Yes, based on the comments and conversation in closed session, we're asking the board to consider the red line version of Resolution 20-02.
Absolutely. Any other comments from the board?
Can you read for the record the red line version?
Yes. The executive director and her designated negotiators are authorized to exercise the 10-year option early to amend the existing lease if such amendment results in cost savings and/or other efficiencies, furthering the agency's long-term success and mission.
Good. Melissa, you want to call a roll call?
Was there a motion in a second?
We need that too, huh?
There's a motion.
Moved by
Russell.
Mr. Russell, seconded by Anna Maria. Okay.
Ms. Avila Frias? Yes. Ms. Gallagher? Ms. Gunn?
Yes.
Mr. Gunning,
Yes.
Mr. Hunter,
Yes.
Ms. Japonda,
Yes.
Mr. Olmsted,
Yes.
Secretary Podesta,
Yes.
Mr. Russell. Ms. Sotelo.
Yes.
Resolution 20-02 is approved.
Awesome. Okay, looks like, want to draw everyone's attention to item 9, the single-family and the conduit issuance report. Is there any discussion of other board matters? Or any comments? Any comments from the public? Anyone want to say anything? Great. Well, Happy New Year, everyone, and we'll see you next time. Thank you. Richard Rothstein, right?
Yes,
On the
Richard
17th of
Rothstein
March.
on the
Make sure
17th.
everyone knows this.
The Color of
The
Law.
best book. Read it. Thanks, everybody.